Hi there, my name is Amalia. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about the books I read in the month of July. I have in total 9 books to talk about, so let's get into the books. First, I want to mention the 3 Pride and Prejudice retellings I've read for Jane Austen July. I don't want to talk about them here because I made a separate video. I just want to mention them a bit. So it is Pride by Ibi Zoboi, Ayesha at Last by Uzma Jalaluddin, and Unmarriageable by Soniah Kamal. So I'll link the video somewhere up or below, somewhere for you if you want to check it out. And now let's get into the rest of the books. The first book I picked up is Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyeyemi. I picked this up because I've seen Helen Oyeyemi's books around BookTube and on a few channels I follow, and I just wanted to give it a try. This one is literary fiction inspired by fairy tale, and it is magical realism as well. I'm not that big of a fan of magical realism, but I wanted to give it a try. So this one follows 3 women, a boy, snow, and bird. We start out with Boy moving from New York to a small town, Flax Hill, and there she meets a widower who has a daughter, Snow. Snow is very popular. She's very beloved in the community and by everyone. And she's like a special girl, I think. Bright and funny and kind. And then when Boy gets a daughter, Bird, she starts feeling a bit jealous of the attention Snow gets. So this book is set in the 1950s, and it is set in a small town which seems really monochromatic, but things are not as they seem, especially because when Bird gets born, things are shaken up. I don't want to spoil it. I think it was a pretty good twist of the novel, but let's just say that things are not as they seem. And the civil rights movement is happening in the background of the story. It's not a big part of it, but it's just there as to give us a bit of a picture of these characters in this small town. So Helen Oyeyemi's writing is heavily inspired by magical realism. So since I'm not used to reading anything in that particular style, or not often anyway, it took me some time to get into it. I think if you just give it like 50 or 100 pages and then you still enjoy it and you get something out of it, then you should continue because it gets better. I really enjoyed reading it, especially because Helen Oyeyemi's writing style is very, very beautiful. I really like the characters, this odd style of writing, and it feels like a bit unsettling and fairy tale-y. I really enjoyed some parts of it, and then some parts were a bit like I didn't understand where the author wanted to go with it, especially towards the end. And looking at the Goodreads reviews, I see that many people give this a bad rating, especially because of the ending, which was, in my opinion, quite unnecessary because it focused on something completely different and it took us out of the story of these 3 women. At its core, this book is about sisterly love, is about motherhood. What I really liked is that it is set in 3 parts, and each part is narrated by a different character. So the first part is narrated by Boy, and then we get narration by Bird. I really liked both of their voices. What I missed a bit is the voice of Snow. Her being the Snow White character needed to be a bit whimsical and a bit of out of reach, and in that way I understand why she wasn't in the story that much. But I feel that it would have given it a whole other depth, to the whole book. So I gave this one 3 stars. I was on the verge of giving a 3.5, but overall, I think it just took me too much time to get into it. And the end took me kind of out of the story. So if you like magical realism, then you should definitely give this a go. Then I picked up nonfiction. It is Boko Haram, Inside Nigeria's Unholy War by Mike Smith. I picked this up because I don't know a lot about Boko Haram apart from the horrific things I've heard on the news some years ago about them kidnapping a lot of schoolgirls in Nigeria. So I wanted to read more about it and understand it a bit better. Mike Smith was stationed as a reporter, journalist in Nigeria for several years. It is really much a descriptive account of the conflict going on in Nigeria surrounding this terrorist group. I didn't know, for example, that Boko Haram means that Western education is forbidden. So I guess that kind of explains what this terrorist group is all about. But this book it's not that long. It's like 200 pages. It's not really written in a chronological order. So in the beginning, we start with the UN building a bombing in Nigeria in 2011. And at the end, the last chapter is about the kidnapping of the girls, which happened, I think, in 2014. So it's not the most current book, but if you want to know more about Boko Haram, I think it's a good one to pick up. What confused me a little bit is, as I mentioned, it's because it's not in chronological order. So we jump back and forth in time, and there's just too many people and too much happening, too much crammed into this small book. I just couldn't follow it, I guess. It was a good introduction to the subject, but I also would have preferred someone who was more analytical and someone with a bit more in-depth knowledge into the whys of this group. What I liked about it is that, for example, there was one chapter where it discussed the history of the country, because it gave me an understanding of where Nigeria was coming from, and it made me understand its people better and and why the conflicts are there today. What I didn't like, for example, is the titles of the chapters. So, for example, the first chapter is, let me see, then you should wait for the outcome. So I was like, that doesn't give me anything. I mean, I don't know why. It's like a quote from something, but I don't know what it means. Pick this up if you want to know more about Boko Haram in Nigeria, but I've seen on Goodreads many other books similar to this, so maybe in the future I'll pick another one up which is maybe a bit more analytical on the subject. But yeah, I think 2 stars from me, even though it's hard to rate a nonfiction like this. How do you rate nonfiction books? Then I picked up Jane Austen's Persuasion as part of Jane Austen July. This is Jane Austen's last novel, and it's said to be her most romantic novel. But it's about missed opportunities. So people feel differently about it. I really liked it, but I think I'm more attached to the movie adaptation. Sorry to say that. But this one is about Anne Elliot and how 8 years ago she was persuaded to end her engagement to Captain Wentworth. And now 8 years have passed, and Elliot is still single and an old maid at 27. But her life changes when Captain Wentworth enters it again. This novel is about Anne Elliot and how she changes from the young, impressionable girl who gets easily persuaded by friends and family. She believes that her family and her friends know what's best for her, and how she changes and matures and makes her own decisions and decides for herself what her life is and who her friends are and how she wants to live her life, I guess. And I guess this is very hard for her to do because in Jane Austen's time, society, especially young girls, I guess relied upon family and friends for advice, especially on something as important as getting married, especially because Anne Elliot comes from a rich family. Her father is a baronet. I really liked how this focuses on, and it's written from the perspective of Anne. So we see how well she understands people. It's not something you see so much when you watch a movie adaptation. And is really much one of the underrated Jane Austen heroines. But I really like how she sticks to her choices. She knows that Captain Wentworth is a good person. And even though she was persuaded to end the relationship with him, she is faithful to him 8 years afterwards as well. And I think that's a rare thing for a Jane Austen heroine, because all of her other heroines like Elizabeth Bennet and Marianne Dashwood, they all marry well above their status or someone equal to them. And they marry someone who is rich and well situated and socially acceptable. But Anne sticks to her choice of Captain Wentworth, who, even though at the beginning he's socially under her, at the end, still socially, I mean, even though he's rich, but he's not on the same social level as her. But she sticks to her choice, does what's best for her. So in that sense, I really, really like this book, even though the writing style I don't think is as approachable, as easy to read as, for example, Pride and Prejudice. There's very little dialogue in this one, and I think I missed that while reading it. Another thing I really liked about this one is how Jane Austen ridicules the 18th century rigid class system. And we see this through the character of Mr. Elliot, who at the beginning seems the best, the most eligible bachelor, but at the end turns out to be not such a stand-up guy. We see this also in the character of Sir Walter Elliot, Anne's father, who is a baronet. He's too wrapped into his social status, and he's so proud of being a baronet. We also see this through Lady Russell, who, even though she means well, puts social class above character, and she misjudges Captain Wentworth. I really enjoyed this. I think I will give this another go at some point and just try to read it at a slower pace so I get more into it. But as of now, I think I'll just keep on rewatching the favorite adaptation of it, because I think it's really, really well done. So 4-star for this. Yeah, I love Jane Austen and all her books. So I can't wait to pick some other ones up. The ones I didn't read, I think Mansfield Park or Northanger Abbey are next on my list. Then I picked up The Danish Girl by David Ebershoff. This is a historical fiction about marriage between two painters, Greta and Ina. It is set in the 1920s, Copenhagen and Paris. This book actually is about Ina's transformation into Lily Elbe. And this one, as I said, is loosely based on true events, because Ina Weiner is one of the pioneers of gender transformation. He's one of the first who underwent a gender transformation surgery. So this one is a very, very lyrical and romanticized account of their marriage. And David Ebershoff made most of it up because he had the hard facts, and then he just made this into a very romantic story in which Greta is supportive of Ina and Lily to be themselves and find their true selves, when in reality these two people drifted apart. I think I went into this expecting something else. So if I want to, next time, I think I'll pick up an Own Voices story. I think I picked this up because of the movie, which I've seen the trailers on and off, and I think I really want to see it at some point. But yeah, I guess I was just disappointed. It was not what I was expecting. So just so you know, when you get into this, that this is a very romanticized account. And what I didn't understand, that, okay, this is a gender transformation, but in some way it felt like Ina had split personality. Is that what you call it? Wait, I have it in my notes here. He suffered from dissociative identity disorder. I don't feel that is what a transgender person is and how a transgender person is. So I just didn't really understand what was up with that, I guess. It's really well written, and I really like the writing style, and in a way I feel that this is more about Greta than Lily, because throughout the book you see how she struggles and how she really cares for both Ina and Lily, and how she wants them to be themselves. So read this as that. Don't read this as Ina's transformation to Lily Elbe, because I think you'll get disappointed. And now I want to see how the book was translated into the movie. I guess this gets also a 3-star from me. Then I picked up a fantasy book, Everless by Sara Holland. This is the first book in the Everless series, YA fantasy novel set in the kingdom of Sempera, where time is money, and this is extracted from people's blood and bound to iron and made into coins. And people can consume these coins and get additional minutes, hours, months to their lives. But of course, only very rich people can afford that. And poor people struggle to get by, and then as last resort, they often end up selling their time. So we follow a main protagonist, Jules, who with her father lives now on the outskirts of this palace, Everless, and they live in poverty. But back in the day, they used to live at the castle where both her and her father were employed and they were servants. But through some events, they had to flee. But now her father is very sick, so she ends up going back to Everless and taking a job there. And this sets in motion quite a few events. So I really like the premise of this book. I think a lot of fantasy books have really great premises. And then when I read them, I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't know if it's as good as it's promised to be. As I said, even though I really enjoyed the premise, I feel that the world building could have been done much, much better. I also didn't like the love triangle in it. I mean, there was a lot of different things happening, action-wise and plot-wise, and also character-wise. There were some reveals I was really surprised by. So I think in that sense, Everless is not the worst YA fantasy out there. But there were just some points that were quite redundant. So many people on Goodreads compare this to the movie In Time with Justin Timberlake. So I think I'm going to just watch that movie and then be done with this series. Unless Sarah Holland comes up with another series with a different premise. And hopefully that will be much better executed and she won't fall into the trap of YA tropes as much. And then the last book I read is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is an adult fantasy set in a very intricate world with dragons. I actually listened to this on Audible. Okay, let me read you the Goodreads premise. A world divided, a queendom without an heir, an ancient enemy awakes. The house of Beretnet has ruled Innis for 1,000 years. Still unwed, Queen Sabran the Ninth must conceive a daughter to protect her realm from destruction. But assassins are getting closer to her door. Iya Durian is an outsider at court. Though she has risen to a position of lady-in-waiting, she is loyal to a hidden society of mages. Iyad keeps a watchful eye on Sabran, secretly protecting her with forbidden magic. Across the dark sea, Tene has trained to be a dragon rider since she was a child, but is forced to make a choice that could see her life unravel. Meanwhile, the divided East and West refuse to parley, and forces of chaos are rising from their sleep. So as you see, this is really an intricate world. It follows many different perspectives. There's a lot of political intrigue in it. And I really applaud Samantha Shannon for her world building. I mean, it was exquisitely done. There was so much detail and there's so much depth to the characters, and it's really, really well done. But it's kind of a web. It's a maze. And maybe because I listened to it on audio, I felt that it was hard for me to get into the story. It was hard for me to follow the story. But I guess that's primarily my fault because I read it through I spaced it out too much, basically. So read this if you're really into fantasy with a lot of political intrigue and a lot of different characters following different perspectives. What made this book for me less enjoyable is, I think, its length. I really like that it is a standalone because many of the fantasies I read are just series and some of them are really dragged out. I don't want to mention City of Brass, but I'm going to mention City of Brass. I don't know how you feel about that. So I really praise Samantha Shannon for squeezing all this plot and all this intrigue into one standalone book. Really, really well done. But I also feel that because it dragged out a bit too much, at the end, the big battle felt a bit anticlimactic for me, especially because there was a lot of build-up and then I think it was kind of resolved quite fast. That was a bit unsatisfying. I can only give it 3 stars, even though I've seen a lot of great reviews for this on Goodreads. Anyway, I think I rambled on for too long here, so I'm just gonna stop here, and I say goodbye. See you next time.